What if the reason you can't stay motivated anymore has nothing to do with laziness? What if your brain slowly stopped believing that effort leads to emotional reward? Most people think motivation is something you either have or you don't. They see motivated people waking up early, going to the gym, building businesses, studying consistently, chasing goals, and they assume those people simply have more discipline, more energy, or stronger minds. But motivation is far more complicated than that. And one of the biggest misconceptions in modern life is the idea that people lose motivation because they are weak. In reality, motivation is deeply connected to emotion, stress, identity, hope, energy, and the way your brain interprets effort itself. That's why losing motivation can feel so confusing. You still care about your goals intellectually. You still want your life to improve. You still imagine a better future. But emotionally, something feels disconnected. The energy is gone. The excitement disappears. Simple tasks suddenly feel heavy. Things you once enjoyed begin feeling emotionally flat. And perhaps the strangest part is this. Many people don't lose motivation all at once. They lose it slowly. Quietly. Without realizing it. At first, it looks harmless. You procrastinate a little more. You stop feeling excited about your routines. You delay important things. You become mentally tired faster. Then eventually you reach a moment where you ask yourself, what happened to me? And maybe you felt that before. Maybe there was a version of you that once felt ambitious, focused, inspired, or emotionally alive. But somewhere along the way, that feeling faded. Not dramatically. Gradually. And understanding why this happens requires understanding something important about the human brain. Your brain is constantly asking one question: is this effort worth it? Motivation is not just about goals. It's about emotional prediction. Your brain studies your past experiences and tries to predict whether future effort will lead to reward, pain, disappointment, stress, or fulfillment. And if the brain repeatedly associates effort with exhaustion, failure, pressure, criticism, or emotional emptiness, motivation begins shutting down. Not because you're lazy. Because your nervous system starts protecting you from disappointment. That's why many people lose motivation after prolonged stress. When the mind becomes overwhelmed long enough, survival mode begins replacing inspiration. And survival mode is not interested in dreams. It cares about energy conservation. This is one reason burnout feels so emotionally strange. A person may still deeply want success, love, health, progress, or change, but internally they feel unable to move. The brain becomes emotionally disconnected from action. And modern life creates this problem constantly. People wake up already mentally tired. They absorb endless information online. They compare themselves to thousands of strangers. They feel pressure to succeed faster. Pressure to look happy. Pressure to keep up. Pressure to become extraordinary. Eventually the nervous system becomes overloaded. An overloaded brain struggles to feel motivated. Because motivation requires emotional energy. One of the most fascinating things about motivation is that it is strongly connected to hope. When people believe their actions matter, motivation increases. When people stop believing effort changes anything, motivation collapses. This is why repeated disappointment affects people so deeply. A failed relationship. A rejected opportunity. Financial struggle. Constant criticism. Goals that never seem to work out. Over time, the brain begins forming dangerous emotional conclusions. Why try? What's the point? Nothing changes anyway. And these thoughts usually don't appear suddenly. They develop slowly through emotional experiences. This is why motivation is not just productivity. It's psychological trust. Your brain must trust that effort has meaning. And once that trust weakens, even simple things become harder. Getting out of bed feels heavier. Focusing becomes difficult. Starting tasks feels emotionally draining. Not because the tasks are impossible, but because the emotional reward system has weakened. Another reason people lose motivation is hidden emotional exhaustion. Many individuals are carrying invisible mental weight constantly. Stress, anxiety, overthinking, emotional suppression, uncertainty, loneliness. And the brain can only handle so much internal pressure before energy starts disappearing. This is why some people confuse exhaustion with laziness. But there's a major difference between not wanting to act and not having the emotional capacity to act. Sometimes the mind is not refusing effort. Sometimes it's depleted. And maybe one of the saddest things about modern society is how quickly people judge themselves during these moments. They say, "I'm lazy. I'm failing. I'm weak. I used to be better." But often, the problem is much deeper than discipline. Sometimes motivation disappears because the nervous system has been overloaded too long without recovery. And something very interesting happens when people stay emotionally overwhelmed for extended periods of time. The future begins losing emotional clarity. Goals stop feeling exciting. Dreams feel distant. Life starts becoming repetitive. This is why chronic stress and low motivation often appear together. A stressed brain focuses on survival, not inspiration. And maybe that explains why some people spend years waiting to feel motivated again. But motivation rarely returns through pressure or self-hatred. You cannot shame the nervous system into healthy energy. In fact, excessive self-criticism often destroys motivation even more. Because the brain begins associating effort with emotional punishment. Think about it. If every time you fail, you attack yourself internally. If every mistake becomes proof you're not enough. If every delay creates guilt. Eventually your mind starts avoiding action altogether. Not because you don't care. But because action itself becomes emotionally painful. This is one reason perfectionism quietly destroys motivation. Perfectionists often appear highly driven from the outside, but internally many are exhausted. Because their motivation is fueled by fear, not emotional fulfillment. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of not being enough. And fear can create temporary action, but eventually it drains emotional energy. Human beings cannot thrive psychologically under constant internal pressure. Another important truth about motivation is that the brain needs progress, not just goals. If effort feels endless without emotional reward, motivation weakens. This is why people quit gyms, businesses, diets, projects, or creative goals so often. The brain wants evidence that effort matters. Small wins matter psychologically more than most people realize. And modern life often disconnects people from meaningful progress because attention becomes scattered constantly. Phones. Notifications. Social media. Endless stimulation. The brain receives tiny dopamine hits all day long from scrolling, videos, likes, messages, and entertainment. And over time, this affects motivation too. Because real goals require delayed reward. Building a better life takes time. Learning skills takes time. Healing emotionally takes time. But the modern brain becomes conditioned for immediate stimulation. Quick entertainment. Quick distraction. Quick emotional escape. Meanwhile, meaningful progress feels slower and emotionally harder. And this creates internal conflict. People want long-term fulfillment while their nervous systems become addicted to short-term relief. That's why motivation today often feels fragile. The brain keeps searching for easy dopamine while struggling to tolerate discomfort. And perhaps one of the most important psychological truths about motivation is this. Human beings are not motivated every day. That's normal. The internet often creates unrealistic expectations where people believe motivated individuals wake up inspired constantly. But real life does not work that way. Even successful people experience doubt, emotional fatigue, low energy, and lack of inspiration. The difference is not that they always feel motivated. The difference is often emotional structure. They build systems that support action even when emotion fluctuates. Because motivation is temporary by nature. No emotion stays permanent. And maybe understanding that changes the way you see yourself. Because many people panic emotionally when motivation disappears. They assume, I'm losing myself. I'll never get back on track. I ruined my future. But temporary emotional disconnection does not mean permanent failure. Sometimes the mind simply needs recovery. Something else people rarely realize is that motivation is deeply affected by identity. People act consistently when behavior aligns with who they believe they are. If someone believes, I'm disciplined, I'm capable, I'm improving, the brain supports those patterns more easily. But if someone secretly believes, I always fail, I never finish anything, I'm not good enough, the nervous system resists action because the behavior conflicts with identity. This is why internal dialogue matters more than most people realize. The words repeated inside the mind slowly shape emotional reality. And motivation weakens dramatically when self-trust disappears. That's another hidden reason people stop trying. Sometimes it's not lack of ambition. It's lack of belief in themselves. After enough disappointment, many people unconsciously stop expecting success. And when expectation disappears, effort becomes harder to sustain. But here's something hopeful. The brain is adaptable. Motivation can return. Not instantly. Not magically. But gradually. Usually through small emotional victories. Keeping tiny promises to yourself. Completing small tasks. Improving sleep. Reducing overstimulation. Moving your body. Spending time around emotionally healthy people. Creating momentum slowly. Little by little, the nervous system begins trusting effort again. And this is important because motivation often follows action, not the other way around. Many people wait to feel ready. But readiness is often created through movement itself. One small action creates momentum. Momentum creates emotional progress. Progress rebuilds belief. And belief changes energy. That's why tiny actions matter more than dramatic plans. A 5-minute walk. Cleaning one small area. Writing one page. Reading a few paragraphs. Going to bed earlier. These things seem small, but psychologically they send an important message to the brain: we are moving again. And movement creates hope. One of the most dangerous things about losing motivation is isolation. People often withdraw when they feel emotionally disconnected. They stop talking openly. Stop engaging socially. Stop sharing struggles. And isolation intensifies hopelessness because the mind begins living entirely inside its own negative interpretations. This is why emotionally safe connection matters so much. Sometimes one conversation can reignite perspective. Sometimes feeling understood restores emotional energy. Human beings recover psychologically through connection more than they realize. And maybe the deepest truth about motivation is that people are not machines. Modern culture often treats humans like productivity systems. Always improve. Always perform. Always hustle. Always optimize. But the nervous system doesn't function like a machine. It functions like a living emotional system. And emotional systems require recovery, meaning, connection, rest, and hope. Without those things, motivation eventually fades. Not because the person is broken. Because the mind is trying to survive. And perhaps many people today are not truly unmotivated. Perhaps they are emotionally overwhelmed, mentally exhausted, disconnected from meaning, overstimulated, burned out from carrying too much pressure for too long. There's a difference. Because when someone is genuinely lazy, they usually feel comfortable doing nothing. But people who lose motivation often feel frustrated, guilty, confused, and emotionally trapped. They want to move forward. They just feel unable to access the energy consistently. And understanding this changes everything. Because self-hatred rarely restores motivation. Understanding does. Patience does. Recovery does. Self-trust does. And maybe the goal is not becoming motivated every single day. Maybe the goal is learning how to continue moving gently forward even when emotions fluctuate. Because real growth is rarely dramatic. Most meaningful change happens quietly. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One small action at a time. And maybe right now, you don't need to completely transform your life overnight. Maybe you simply need to stop believing that losing motivation means losing yourself. Because beneath the exhaustion, the confusion, the procrastination, and the emotional heaviness, there may still be a part of you quietly waiting to believe in the future again. And sometimes healing begins the moment you realize you were never weak. You were simply carrying more than your nervous system was meant to carry alone. If this helped you understand your mind better, subscribe for more videos like this.